Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I am here with the fantastic writer of many, many things. But we're here to discuss one thing in particular about a turtle that I fell in love with. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yeah, hi. I'm excited to be talking with you today. I'm Saadia Faruqi. I am a children's author. I write a lot of for different age groups, including the Yasmin series, which is an early reader series, and middle grade novels like Yusuf Azim is Not a Hero. And my latest book that I'll be talking about today is my first graphic novel, Saving Sunshine, which I have written but not illustrated. The illustrator is the very talented Shazleen Khan, but I'm the writer on that. So I'll be talking at least from that perspective today. Yeah, so Saving Sunshine is a middle grade graphic novel. It is about a pair of twins, Zara and Zish. They're in 7th grade, and they really don't get along. They're always fighting, always playing pranks on each other, and their parents are really not only disappointed, but worried about how their relationship is disintegrating. In the beginning of the story, they are on their way to the beach for a week-long vacation, and on the way, their parents, as punishment for all their fighting, take their phones away and banish them to the beach to spend the entire week together. Zara finds a turtle on the beach that's injured, and she decides to take care of it because she's a big animal activist. She names the turtle Sunshine, and poor Zish, who doesn't care about anything except space, but now has to spend time with his annoying sister and this turtle he doesn't care about. So hopefully by the end of the book, they might get to know each other a little bit better and get back to maybe being friends and saving their relationship while they also save this turtle called Sunshine. So that's the story.
Thank you so much for joining us, Saadia. This is such a lovely book. And before we get into it too much, I'd love if you could start by telling us a little bit about your journey to the book. You mentioned some of the other things that you've written. In particular, the Yasmin books are very popular at our library.
Yay!
And so, yes, I love recommending them to people, and they're always a hit too. So could you talk a little bit about, your journey to this book and maybe what made you want to approach graphic novels as a project?
The story idea it's a story about a pair of twins that are not at all friendly with each other. They're always fighting and don't get along at all. And I usually write everything I write comes from something around me, and usually my kids. And my kids always used to be fighting, not at all friendly with each other, especially when I started this book. And so that's where the idea of it came from. But I had originally thought I would write it as my next middle grade novel, because I have written a few, and that's what I was thinking of doing. But as I started writing, and coming up with the idea, there's a lot in there that's more than just the overall story of a turtle. It's about microaggressions that kids face if you are part of a certain identity. And I just felt more and more that describing those issues and those themes in words would kind of take away from the impact of it. And if there was a way that those stories could be told in a form of pictures, illustrations, art, I thought that it would have a better, greater impact. And so I decided that this was just when graphic novels were starting to really become popular. And so I decided to try it. It's not as easy as it may sound. Writing a graphic novel, especially if you're not also the artist, is really hard. And I had to kind of learn how to do that, but it was fun learning. I learned something new, and I thought that was the best decision for the story to be told in that format.
Yeah. So first off, I did I was way too reductive to say it's about a turtle because that is only one small part of it, but that was what leapt to mind during my intro. But to the other
Oh,
part,
it's on the cover, so
that's
the
true.
turtle's on the cover.
The iconic sunshine. But I was really taken by what you just said because, it occurred to me that, yeah, like for a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, like the everyday microaggressions and sort of the way that it impacts people, not only in terms of like how they react out loud, but how they emotionally process. Graphic novels are great for that because you can do a lot with facial expressions and how people are moving away from or towards each other, and all
Yeah.
that kind of visual stuff that really, I think, communicates that really well. um yeah, could you talk a little bit about how where the two main characters came from and sort of what shaped their journey, through this story, and how did you pick the sort of uh I guess both the nature of their conflict with each other and like their conflict with the kind of the world around them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I have two kids. They're both teenagers now, but when I started writing this book, in case you don't know, it takes several years for a graphic novel to be published. So when I first got the idea for this, they were either both in middle school, or maybe my daughter was in upper elementary and my son was in middle school. They have a 3-year gap between them. So I'm trying to remember how old they were, but they suddenly started fighting a lot, and they hadn't been, and then it got bad, and it was a shock to me and my family because we weren't sure where it was coming from. It was a lot of just playing, mean tricks on each other, or pranks, or just being disrespectful to each other, and I didn't want that for my kids. And being a writer, I tend to write about things that I see, which is how my entire, list of books that I've published has come about. Um, but I see something happening usually with my kids, and I want to write about it because that's how I process. But I also feel like there must be other kids who are going through similar things. And so I kept thinking, what would make siblings that were pretty friendly with each other get into this sudden conflict? Where would that come from? How would they resolve it? What could parents do? Because I was worried. I was really worried about it. Um, and that's how the story kind of gained shape. But as any writer knows, once you start with a little seed of an idea, you still have to come up with the whole plot and what's going to happen and what are some of the background backstories and things like that. And so in the story, the two characters are twins. They're not like my kids, older and younger siblings. Um, and there's a lot of backstory that happens in flashbacks in the book, about how they came where they into the stage where they couldn't stand each other. They had been growing apart. They have completely different or opposing interests. It's not like, okay, I don't like what you like, but literally Zara, the girl, is into animals and conservationism and taking care of the planet, and Zeesh, the boy, is into space and literally, millions of light years away from his sister in terms of how he thinks and what he thinks is important. And a lot of that is how both of these two have been treated by other people, and how they've kind of um, how they've how they've tried to grapple with that, and those perceptions coming their way by shaping who they are as people. So
Mm.
there's a lot in that story, but it's also a very basic story about taking care of a turtle. So, like any good story, there are all those layers.
Mm. Yeah, there are a lot of layers, and I do think that, the the outer the hostility of the outer world around them on occasion that really affects them emotionally does have a really large impact on their conflict as well. Because I think it also, like, maybe I am like psycho analyzing too much, but I feel like their deep interests are maybe also like sort of protective or like survival techniques. Like it is a world that they can escape into, kind of, to
Yeah.
escape what's going on around them. And maybe that's why it's like so sacred, like why they feel like they have to protect it too, like from the other one. Um, I saw on your website that you are also like an interfaith activist, and that work, obviously really um treads through this entire book. um has have you approached that stuff in your other work as well at the other age levels? And does the age level influence how you project the message, if that makes sense?
Yes to both questions. I started out, I'm an immigrant. I'm originally from Pakistan. I came here to the US as an adult. I was 22 years old when I came to this country, and this was just maybe 2, 3 years before 9/11. And so I kind of right after 9/11, I decided that I wanted to kind of do what I could. I saw a lot of backlash towards my community and just outsiders in general. People who were seen as outsiders may not necessarily have been somebody who was different, somebody who wasn't, what it meant at that time to be an American, quote unquote. So I wanted to be a part of that, and it gave rise to this kind of interfaith, intercultural activism that started literally within my own community, and then grew and grew and grew. I was speaking, I was talking, I was writing, and I did that for a good maybe 15 years, but I got really burned out. It's a lot, it's difficult, challenging work, and you get a lot of negativity thrown your way. But also whenever you're doing something for that long, oftentimes you think that it's time for a change. So I still wanted to keep writing. I just kind of changed my focus from interfaith, or non-fictional to fiction. I realized that telling stories could also have a good impact, actually more of an impact on trying to convince people that, you're not that different from them, even though you may look different, or you may worship differently, or you may speak a different language. There's a lot that we can learn from each other, and there's a lot we share in terms of life experiences. And you can do that really well through a story. It doesn't have to be a true story, or about your own life, however you want to portray it. And so every single book I write has that mission. I feel like my overall goal and mission in life has not changed. It's still the same. It's just how I do that work has changed. And for me now, it's more about writing these stories that are very much reflective of my family's experience and my community's experience, whether that community is a religious community or a cultural community or a marginalized community, whatever. There's so much overlap in all of those. And so, yes, all of that is still very much present. It's more obvious in some books than others. I try to focus on more of the interfaith and intercultural aspect in my books for older kids. So middle grade novels and above, you'll see my first middle grade novel, A Place at the Table, which I co-wrote with Laura Chauvin, who's a Jewish American author. And that is very much about a Jewish girl and a Muslim girl trying to, be friends when the community around them doesn't necessarily see them as that way. And what it means to be an immigrant and an outsider and things like that. So yeah, all of those themes are there in my books for older kids. My books for younger kids, like the Yasmin books, it's not as blatant. It's more about just showcasing what a family is like if they're Muslim American and Pakistani American and immigrant. It's just there's no actual storyline or plot related to those themes as it would be in my books for older kids. So I kind of just try to make sure that it's age appropriate. When you're 7 or 6, you don't care about that. You just want to read a good story, but you can still see a lot through the pictures. You can see, oh, this person's mama dresses different from my mom, but it's the same role of a mom. Or they speak a different language than I do, but it's easy to understand what they're saying because I have context clues. So all of that is kind of part of my work in different ways.
That's so interesting. And like the Yasmin books are popular with every demographic at our library.
Yes.
They are really wonderful. And even just the work of representation is doing work in and of itself. And I'm wondering, with the older children, do you think that maybe in some cases children are more receptive to these messages than adults are even? Because
yes, I feel like that's why I switched, because I realized that, a lot of my early interfaith work was speaking to, say, a group of grown-ups, adults, and a lot they're already set in their ways. They already believe what they believe. They might be open to hearing your message, but a lot of times they're not. But when you're a kid, you're still learning, you're still forming opinions, and our kids are so smart and they're so open and they're so receptive and they're not closed-minded like, their older generations are. And so definitely, I feel like um, if you show those messages of inclusivity and being kind and generous to other people and being okay with differences of all kinds and embracing people who are different from you. If you have those messages, um, uh, if you give those messages to kids, they grow up to be way better adults. So I
Mm-hmm.
totally agree with that.
Yeah. And children, I guess, are, more malleable too, because this book does depict some children who, you know, express some Islamophobic
Mhm.
sort of discriminatory views that they probably, picked up from the adults around them.
Absolutely.
And so that sort of early intervention seems like you know, uh a lot more effective maybe than trying to correct that thinking when a person is an adult, and their views have sort of hardened a little bit. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, they're always kids who listen to, the adults in their lives and kind of just repeat those things, not really realizing that those might be insensitive or ignorant. But and yeah, I always want to depict that reality that not every kid is going to be, open and understanding, and also not every adult is going to be awful and mean. So we want to show both sides of that for sure as writers.
Hmm. So something that I also really loved about the book is the way that there are sort of like facts from the world of like the interests that either about nature or about space. And
Hmm.
I love that they are kind of threaded in, and it feels very like natural to the ways that kids think too, so I remember being a kid and having like my really deep interests, and like things that you hear or see will just sort of like spark,
Yeah,
like that
yeah,
fact. And like
absolutely.
capture that kid's voice? Like, how do you capture kid thinking, kid feelings? Like, do you have to like get yourself into that sort of mode?
Definitely you have to. And for the longest time I've been, you know, I've had my kids that I've been watching and and my kids always go through my first drafts and give me suggestions, especially my daughter who is a more of has a writer mindset. But in this book in particular, there's so these two kids in the beginning of the book, they get their phones taken away as punishment, and which is a very, very awful punishment apparently for kids. Honestly, for me too, it would be a pretty bad
Yes.
situation if I had to not be with my be without my phone for a while. But they love their phones because of these apps that they have on their phones. And for Zara, there's a nature app that she's really reliant on because she's into nature and animals, and she records all the things that she sees, and she searches up and researches and learns from it. And so you see some of those there. And actually, I had in my first draft of the story, I did not have anything like that. But when we wrote the story and then we were revising it, my editor at the publishing house, Macmillan for Second, she suggested, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool?" She suggested to the artist that wouldn't it be cool if we had these little um, uh, almost like I don't know, they're like squares in some of those panels where it's more like a phone screen and you can see some information about whatever they're talking about in terms of an animal or a fact. And then since we were doing it for Zara, it seemed unfair not to do it for poor Z. So you got some of his space facts as well, because he needs his phone to watch NASA videos and learn more about the different, bodies in space. And yeah, I think it's cool to have that little bit of a learning component and to make it more realistic. Was like you said, kids often do learn that way, and they're so reliant on their technology now that that is how they are gaining a lot of information. on a daily basis. You're talking about something, just pick up your phone, search it up, and it's there. So it's literally how a lot of us live now, especially the younger generation.
Mhm. Absolutely. And something that I love about it too is that, so they start with these kind of like antagonistic views towards each other's interests, but as their phones are removed from the equation, they sort of are like almost forced to get these glimpses into each other's world, and they come to like respect each other a little bit, and so
Right.
it's fun to see like um it felt really real, that like because they are very antagonistic, but also like there are moments of like real love and bonding between them too.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
because when you are a kid, you can ping pong between those things like in 30 seconds, like you so
Absolutely. And that was the point of the parents giving them that punishment. The punishment was to take their phones away, but also secondly, they have to spend all their time at this week-long vacation they're on together. And it was intentional because the hope was that if they hang out together, they'll see how the other one kind of functions, and hopefully, get into a little bit of the other person's interest. Um, so yeah, kids are kind of a lot of that seesaw emotions going on.
um before we wrap up, could you talk a little bit about the art, because it is fantastic, and your artist really, I think, captures both like a really beautiful environment and does really beautiful storytelling, like with character design and faces and stuff like that. So can you talk about like, yeah, how you found each other and how that collaboration worked?
Yeah, so usually an artist or illustrator for a project is found or located by the publisher. So authors don't always, or usually they don't typically get even beforehand knowledge. My publishers are awesome in the fact that they'll run things by me. They'll tell me, hey, this is who we're considering. I think there were 2 or 3 people that they were considering. And then, as is always the case, those people kind of audition for the art. They'll send in samples, and whoever we kind of like feel fits the tone of the story um, gets chosen or offered the contract. So I didn't really do any part of it. I didn't know who she was beforehand. Shazleen Khan, she lives in England. She's from her family heritage is from Bangladesh, so she's also got the South Asian background, and it was really important to me to have that. It always is for all my books, and my publisher is always happy to accommodate that. But she's such a great choice because she's a great artist, but it also fits so well with the story because the story is set on the beach, and her art is like almost it's like watercolor. There's a lot of blues and greens, and there's the beach at night and the beach in the morning and the beach in the evening, and those depictions of space, and it's just so fitting. She really brings everything to life, including the characters for sure. So I'm very happy with the result. She's phenomenal, and it really fit with everything that the story was speaking. It kind of like was the vehicle to tell the story. Her art.
I have a comics partner. She does the art, and we've only written like 2 things so far, so we haven't done a lot. But I know like that feeling of like giving her words and then getting amazing pictures back is just like it feels like a miracle every time. You're like, what? It's like
Yeah, yeah. It is cool. There's a lot of revisions and back and forth though that goes on in a graphic novel, especially of this length. So, the artist usually does sketches, and then and I do have a lot of art notes in my script. So typically a writer would write a script almost like a play or a screenplay, but there's always a lot of notes, and that to kind of like show your vision, like if it's a school that the characters are in, then kind of describing what the school looks like or what the community around them looks like or what the people are wearing, things like that. So you do have those to help guide the artist. But there's always back and forth, things come back and then you ask for more definition, or maybe this scene could be go on more. You could expand it into more panels, more pages. So that's kind of regularly done by everybody, but it's thankfully not where I just get surprised with the final product, because I would, I'm sure everyone would have a lot of comments or feedback. So they give me lots of chances to suggest, oh, can we change this, or this doesn't work, or how can we make this better?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it seems like a very interesting kind of collaborative experience. And I wonder, like, if you are giving notes on what to give guidance for the images, like those notes must take up just as much, if not more space than just the dialogue too, right? Like, because you have to probably get really detailed.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very frequent. Usually, at the beginning of every scene, it would kind of describe where they are or what they're doing. A lot of times, my editor asks for notes on expressions, like what is do you want Zara to be upset or shocked? Because oftentimes, if it's just dialogue, then it may be difficult to know. So yeah, some of those, but it's not constant. I mean, you can't. That wouldn't be like, I wouldn't want any illustrator to telling me how to write my story. So I don't want to kind of limit them to how to draw. But yeah, just usually beginning of a scene, um, and some cases it's more than others. If it's more culturally specific, what somebody's dress is important to get. For example, in this book, Zara's hijab correct, and the length of her dress, and make sure that she's covered properly, or all of those things that somebody from might just need a little bit more direction in. But the good news was Shazin's also part of the same culture as me, so I didn't have to tell her a lot. She already knew a lot of stuff.
Mhm. Right. Well, the final product is lovely, and this book was such a joy to read, and I'm very excited to be able to share it with more of our patrons and my family members. So thank you so much for joining us and for, bringing me this lovely book.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to having people read it. And as always, people can message me on my website or on social media to tell me what they think. Hopefully good things, but always open to hear what readers are saying.
Oh, nice. All right, you hear that, listeners? You absolutely need to check out Saving Sunshine by Saadia Faruqi. It is an absolutely lovely, lovely book, and I think readers of all ages will really enjoy it because I'm 40 and I loved it.
I'm glad.
All right, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.